Good morning, my dear students. I hope everything is going great with you. Today we will take the last part of our story, Jim Thorpe's Bright Path. Okay, our last time, you remember that we stopped at the last part in page 366 when he went to Garden Grove School, and one day a recruiter came from Carlisle Indian Boarding School, and he was discussing with Jim to go with him to Carlisle Indian School. Okay, but first let me remind you of our story. I want you to refresh your memory about the story. Let's hear this video. Let's hear this video about the story and we will see. Okay? Listen to this video first and we will see that if you still remember from the beginning of our story.
Brown and I am a fourth grade ELA better master teacher in Memphis, Tennessee. Jim Thorpe is considered one of the greatest.
She speaks about Jim Thorpe.
Jim's Native American name, Wacohuck, means bright path. In this lesson, students complete a close read and find out how Jim's childhood and the many challenges he faced throughout his childhood and life helped him have a bright path to become a great American sports legend.
She said that he suffered many tragedies in his life. He suffered a lot of challenges to prove and to achieve himself. Now we will complete our story. While listening to the story, I'll explain like every time. Okay? Open your book, page 366, and let's complete.
Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania came to Garden Grove. Carlisle was always looking for Indian students who were good athletes, and the recruiter had heard of Jim's success as a runner at Haskell. "Would you like to be a Carlisle man?" the recruiter asked. "Can I study electricity there?" Jim said. "Of course," the recruiter replied, even though Carlisle offered no such course. Something else also attracted Jim to Carlisle: sports. Carlisle was one of the most well-known of the Indian boarding schools. Everyone knew about the school and its amazing record of winning sports teams.
Carlisle was a famous boarding school, Indian boarding school. It take care of the Indians and it tried to make them very great athletes. Okay, now actually this man he succeeded in convincing Jim to go to Carlisle school.
The Carlisle Indians even beat teams from the big famous colleges. At Carlisle, Jim thought, he could play football. Pa Thorpe urged Jim to seize the opportunity. Somehow, he knew Carlisle would be the first step on a trail that would lead his son to greatness. "Son," he said, "you are an Indian. I want you to show other races what an Indian can do." Soon after Jim arrived at Carlisle, he received bad news. His father had been bitten by a snake while working in his fields and had died of blood poisoning.
Bad news, bad news. His father died. His father died from blood poisoning. His father died from blood poisoning. A snake has bitten him. A snake has bitten him. So now Jim will be alone. Because first his brother died, and then his mom died, and now his dad also died. He will become alone, and he will live in Carlisle boarding school.
The man who had fought so hard to force his son to get an education was gone. Already a quiet person, Jim retreated further into silence after his father's death. But he did not desert Carlisle. Perhaps Jim felt the best way to remember his father was to live the dream Pa Thorpe had for him. It was now up to Jim to push himself. The Carlisle system of sending new students off campus for work experience helped. Jim ended up at a farm in New Jersey. The farm labor reminded him
the way of this school is completely different, because in this school they are sending the students to a campus to work, to gain a work experience that help them to build their bodies and to gain a lot of experience like that. It will help them after that in their life. This is, as we say, the policy of this school.
of the many hours he had spent working by Pa's side in Oklahoma. Jim worked so hard and with such quiet confidence that everyone saw him as a man they could like and trust. To his delight, Jim was made foreman, head of all the workers. When Jim came back to Carlisle in the fall, he was no longer a boy. He had grown taller, stronger, more self-assured. He was ready to play football, but he knew it would not be easy. Carlisle's famous coach, Pop Warner,
after coming from the campus, he wants to play football in the school. But let's see what will happen with him in front of the coach Bob Warner. The coach Bob Warner is a very famous coach in Carlisle School, and his team is so famous.
would only allow the best to join his track squad or his football team as one of his athletic boys. One day, Jim's big chance came. He was on his way to play a game of scrub football with some of his friends who were too small for the school team. As Jim crossed the field, he saw a group of varsity athletes practicing the high jump. Jim asked if he could have a try, even though he was wearing overalls and an old pair of work shoes. The athletic boys snickered as they reset the bar for him. It placed it higher than anyone at Carlisle had ever jumped. Even in his work clothes, Jim cleared the bar on his first jump. No one could believe it. People stood around with their mouths wide open, staring. Jim just grinned and walked off to play football with his friends.
Sorry, we will complete it now. Page 367. We will complete our video now. Sorry.
The next day, Jim was told to report to the office of Coach Warner. Everyone knew Pop Warner was a great coach, but he was also a man with a bad temper. Jim wondered if Pop was going to yell at him.
He will meet the coach, Bob Warner, in the school. He will tell him to join the team. Okay? So it will be the first step to fulfill his father's dream and to achieve himself as a great athlete.
Pop Warner growled. Nothing bad, I hope, Jim said. Bad? Pop Warner said. His face broke into a smile. Boy, you've just broken the school record. Go down to the clubhouse and exchange those overalls for a track outfit. You're on my track team now. Before long, Jim Thorpe was Carlisle's best track athlete. He competed in the high jump, hurdles, and dashes, winning or placing in all of them. Still, Jim wanted to play football. Reluctantly, Pop Warner told him he could give it a try. Pop Warner didn't like the idea of his slender high jumper being injured in a football game, so he decided to discourage Jim.
Jim now played like a jumper. He played like a jumper, but Jim, he wants to join football, okay?
By beginning his first practice with a tackling drill. Jim, the newcomer, had to take the ball and try to run from one end to the other through the whole varsity team. Is that all? Jim said. He looked at the football in his hands. It was the first time he'd ever held a real football. but he believed in himself. Then he took off down the field like a deer. He was past half the team before the players even saw him coming. At the other end, Jim looked back. Behind him was the whole Carlisle team, the players holding nothing in their hands but air. There was a grin on Jim's face when he handed Coach Warner the ball. "Doggone it," Pop Warner said. "You're supposed to give the first team tackling practice, not run through them." Pop Warner slammed the ball back into Jim's belly. "Do it again." Jim's jaw was set as he ran the Carlisle gauntlet a second time. He was carrying not just a football, but the hopes and dreams of his family, his people, and all the Indians who had been told they...
Now, let's see. Now Jim will fulfill his father's dream. Now Jim was doing all the hopes, and he was achieving all the dreams of his family, his people, and all the Indians who had been told they could never compete with the white man in America. Okay? See what's going on with this legend, with this sportsman or athlete. He is approving. He is achieving his dreams, and he tried to do what he wants. He wants to play football. He wants to be famous. He wants to achieve all the family dreams.
He could never compete with the white man. Tacklers bounced off Jim as he lowered his shoulders. No one stopped him. The sun shone around him as he stood in the end zone. For years, Jim had fought against his education. He had run away from it so many times. This time, Jim used all he had learned from his mother's wisdom, his brother's encouragement, and his father's fierce determination that his son show what an Indian could do. From now on, Jim Thorpe would run forward, toward the finish line, toward the goal. He didn't know how far he would go, but he believed in his journey. His education had put his feet on the bright path.
We can say that Jim Thorpe achieved his goal. Jim Thorpe achieved his goal. Okay? Now we will go back and we will try to answer some questions, and the rest of the questions I'll send in the website for you to answer it. But let's answer some questions together. Number one, how Jim was different than Charlie. You remember Charlie, the brother of Jim? Yes, Jim was faster and stronger. Jim was faster and stronger. What else? Yes, we made it. After that, why did the teachers hit Indians with a ruler if they spoke their language? This was in the first boarding schools they went to. Why did the teachers hit Indians with a ruler if they spoke their language? The teachers wanted them to forget their culture. The teachers wanted them to forget their culture. After, what is the main idea? What is the main idea of our story? Jim preferred outdoor activities. Jim preferred outdoor activities. The rest of the questions, I'll send it in the website. I want you to answer. If you have any question, contact me. Thank you for today and goodbye. Have a nice day.